This afternoon to bring forward this motion. I move the motion. Welcome the opportunity to bring forward this motion in support and to achieve some measure of justice for the group that have become known as the Women of Honour and others. Support that is echoed across the country, and it would also seem in some local authority by government party-owned TD or councillors, given motions recently put forward. And I am not going to lie and I am not going to sugarcoat when I say I am appalled and I am deeply saddened that circumstances have progressed in such a manner that this motion is necessary this afternoon. I am also deeply disappointed at the proposed government amendment to the Sinn Féin motion, and I am somewhat perplexed at the government quoting us back literal sentences from our own motion. Now, if we cast our minds back to 5 months ago, across the country, listeners were rendered speechless by the documentary on One by Katie Hannon, titled Women of Honour. Even those of us who had been in contact with the women in the run-up to that documentary and had some small idea of what was to come were, like others, deeply, deeply disturbed at the range and the depth of the issues raised. Those harrowing experiences recounted in public by these women of sexual assault, harassment, abuse, discrimination made for really uncomfortable and worrying listening. These female former members of the Defence Forces displayed bravery and courage and fortitude in coming forward into such a public domain to tell of their experiences. And given the government amendment, they are characteristics that they are going to continue to need to call on as the government effectively gaslights them. The revelation of what those women endured made it very clear that Ireland, like many other countries, was experiencing our own military Me Too movement, and that we would not be left unscathed. In the aftermath of the revelations, there was meetings between ministers and officials and the group themselves, and assurances were provided in public and in private that the Women of Honour would have input into the terms of reference. In a statement that September regarding the establishment of an inquiry into allegations, Minister Coveney confirmed that this would happen. However, here we are today in February 2022, and it appears to not only have been a change of heart, but a change of priorities. The only ask, that of a statutory inquiry, has been ignored, and instead an internal review is the only show in town. So the Minister and his officials are trying to convince not only the Women of Honour, but the rest of us that it is perfectly reasonable and not insulting at all to dilute the only ask of the key stakeholders, an ask made so that no one else would go through the experiences that they did. How are these women who chose to serve this state and were repeatedly let down by structures and successive governments expected to have faith now in a review where nobody is compelled to engage or attend and will rely entirely on the goodwill of potential conversations? Small wonder the Women of Honour left that last meeting with the Minister of Defence, which I presume is still in committee, seeing as dealing with foreign affairs, seeing as he's not here to deal with defence. They said to me, as they did in a public statement, that they effectively felt like they had been patted on the head. That was their takeaway. The core message from the Women of Honour was that they want to ensure that no other member of the Defence Forces endures what they did. They know, just as the Minister knows, that nothing will change as a result of this review. The Minister needs to re-engage with the key stakeholders, the Women of Honour group, and create fit-for-purpose terms of reference which provide for adequate scope to deal with the issues in a statutory inquiry and not a review. It may be late in coming, but there is still the opportunity for the Minister for Defence to do the right thing and to do it by this group.
Deputy Cronin.
Last Corla, the State is doing a grave dishonour to the Women of Honour by refusing to grant the commission of investigation that they want and deserve. In recounting their appalling experiences at the hands of men, among them senior officers, wearing the uniform of this state, They are taking on not just their alleged abusers, but the entire apparatus of the Defence Forces and of the state itself. And by God, in this state, do we know how the institutions like to protect themselves. And by God, do we know the lengths the state will go to defend the indefensible, and to do so lavishly and at great effort with the people's own money. Because it's not lost on people, anyone who has to challenge the state and its agencies, that it's their own taxes pay for the legal and institutional war that the state wages against them. The names Vicky Phelan and the late Emma Vic-Nahuna and Bridget McCole come to mind. The review proposed by the Minister is an insult to these women, the experiences they are making in public and to their bravery. Such a review degrades the service, their courage and their commitment to this state and to all of us by extension. A commission of investigation, statutory and independent, is the very least that should be offered, because what they are raising, sexual harassment, abuse, coercion, manipulation and rape, are things that go to the heart of the history of women in this state. That they should raise this in the defence forces of the state and that it is granted a review is, quite frankly, it's disgusting. It also re-victimises and re-traumatises them by diminishing their experience in the behaviour of alleged and minimising the examination of it to a simple review. Ordinary people in Ireland are better than this, and we must do better by these women. Women who, by the way, are highly disciplined and highly trained to defend and protect this state and keep the peace abroad. They're not looking for kid glove treatment. These women are well able to defend the women that are coming up behind them. I commend them and every one of them for telling their story, and I commend Circuit Clerk for this PMB, and as she's already outlined, no inside job here, Minister, no review. Let them have the statutory commission of investigation.
Patricia Ryan.
I'd like to begin by commending the Women of Honour for their bravery, courage and commitment in sharing their experiences in the public arena to bring about change. Unfortunately, the allegations, while shocking, were no surprise to me. I had read reports of the work done by former Captain Tom Clonan. I had also read the emails that all TDs receive almost daily from retired Sergeant Anthony O'Brien. Many of you will be familiar with the C1 Excel document, which details a litany of allegations, including allegations involving male victims and the sexual abuse of children. There are many sad and sick stories in this document, including that of a female soldier who was raped on her first tour overseas. Her rapist was fined 3 days' pay. The female soldier was labelled a troublemaker, a slut and worse, and was badly let down by the system that was meant to protect her. She attempted suicide a number of times and became an alcoholic. The story of a female sailor who was drugged and raped, which resulted in pregnancy. During the pregnancy, she miscarried. She told her doctor what had happened, and he told her it was her word against the rapist. The officer who raped her was a serial rapist who was known for trying to get into female bunks while at sea. He was eventually forced to retire with a senior petty officer's pension and a gratuity. The story of the rape of 2 female soldiers while on tour of duty in Lebanon by 4 soldiers. These soldiers had a reputation for depraved behaviour. The 2 female soldiers had their drinks spiked. They were then stripped and alienly raped. The rapist then redressed them and put them back to bed. There are many allegations which resulted in cover-ups, forced moves, closing ranks and a quiet retirement of perpetrators. It is clear that the current internal system for dealing with complaints is not fit for purpose and fails to protect those who lodge complaints, those tasked with carrying out investigations. In the Women of Honour documentary, we heard the story of Ciara, who not only had to endure sexual harassment, but had to pay €2,500 to buy her way out of the Defence Forces. Talk about rubbing salt in the wounds. This government must commit to zero tolerance of workplace bullying, harassment, discrimination, assault, sexual harassment and sexual assault in all forms, and all forms of gender-based violence. The first step is to establish a full statutory inquiry into these allegations. It is time to acknowledge the wrongs of the past and to ensure our defence forces are a safe environment for all.
There are 3 speakers here. Are there 4 left? Deputy Kenny, are you speaking on this? No. I'll just read out. I have Deputy Mark Ward, Deputy Imelda Munster and Deputy Paul Donnelly. Yeah. Yeah, okay, Deputy Mark Ward. Deputy Mark Ward. That's okay, that's okay. You're all busy.
Deputy Kenny's in that list as well, isn't it? Four speakers left.
4 speakers.
Yeah, 2.5 minutes. Yeah. I had to lose about half a minute there now, Count Carla.
Well, I had to clarify why you left out. Yeah.
First of all, Count Carla, I just want to thank my colleague Sorcha Clark for not only bringing this motion before the Dáil, but also on the tireless work that she has done on this issue. It was very difficult for any of the women of honour to come forward and tell their stories. They've had to wade and fight their way through bureaucratic and cultural systems that are designed to keep them quiet and not to challenge the status quo. And on that note, I want to extend my admiration and my support to the Women of Honour group and all survivors who have come forward bravely to tell their stories. Abuse and harassment are totally unacceptable in any workplace, and we must show zero tolerance as a society. And the Defence Forces should be no different. All Defence Force personnel should be treated equally with dignity and respect at work. They should have the same rights to a safe workplace than any other sector of society. Unfortunately, recent horrific incidents have brought the difficulties that women encounter daily right to the fore. And while it should not have taken the death of Aisling Murphy to catapult gender-based harms into the public domain, we have an opportunity now to address all the difficulties that women face just by being women. The Government need to establish a full statutory inquiry into allegations in the Defence Forces of abuse, harassment, sexual abuse and repercussions following engagement with the internal system. The Government, especially Minister for Defence Simon Coveney, continues to fail and let down these women. The proposal to hold a review is far short of what is needed. There must be re-engagement with all key stakeholders, including representatives of the Women of Honour, to create a fit-for-purpose terms of reference which provide for adequate scope to deal with all these issues. The current internal system for dealing with complaints is just not fit for purpose. And these allegations of bullying, harassment, assault and rape in the Defence Forces are deeply concerning and require a commission of investigation. Survivors have been very clear that nothing less than a commission of investigation will be acceptable in appropriately examining what has happened. It must be fixed now, Minister, and it must be fixed now to protect all current and future members of the Defence Forces and the Navy services.
Deputy Imelda Munster, 2.5.
Thanks, Les Corley. I want to welcome the opportunity to speak to this very important motion brought forward by my colleague, Deputy Sorcha Clark. I think we were all horrified by the stories told in Katie Hannon's RTE documentary last September, which laid bare the horrific abuse, harassment and discrimination experienced by some female members of the Defence Forces. At that time, Minister Coveney gave assurances that those affected would have input into the terms of reference of any investigation that would take place, saying that this issue was a priority for him. He met with the women, who told him that they wanted an independent investigation into the problems with the complaints procedures, as well as addressing the cultural actions after a complaint is made, including prolonged harassment and bullying. But instead, Minister Coveney reneged on his earlier commitments and announced an internal review, not a statutory inquiry. An internal review with terms of references which were not agreed by the women affected. There will be no compellability under this review, and there will be no criticism, no blame, no factual or legal findings, just an internal review of the process. Quite frankly, that's very offensive. It shows contempt for the women who have experienced abuse and harassment and have bravely spoken publicly about those dreadful experiences. These women rightly feel let down and that they have been sidelined. It's a complete failure by Minister Coveney to understand the seriousness of the allegations, and it does nothing to address the root problems, and it will not address what happens after a complaint is made, where the complainants are harassed, bullied and victimised. Minister Coveney needs to go back to the drawing board here and establish a full statutory inquiry into these allegations, including what happens after a complaint is made. He needs to engage with the women affected and other stakeholders to ensure that the terms of reference are fit for purpose. If the government is serious about how women are treated in society, then you need to fix this. We need a government that will ensure zero tolerance of workplace bullying, harassment, discrimination, as well as sexual assault and harassment and all forms of gender-based violence. We've had enough talk about it. Now we need to see action.
Deputy Paul Donnelly.
Finally, first I'd like to commend the bravery and determination of the women in their pursuit for truth and justice. There should be no delay by this government in the implementation of a statutory commission of investigation into the allegations by the Women of Honour. Minister Coveney can do the right thing, and I implore him to do that. The state must stand up to the perpetrators of abuse towards women and let them see that their alleged positions of superiority does not become a hiding place for their actions. I receive weekly correspondence, and probably all of the deputies receive correspondence from an ex-soldier who has been championing the cause of sexual abuse survivors in the force over many years, both male and female, and nearly all at the hands of senior officers. It's not a new problem in the Defence Forces, but it must stop and it must be dealt with now. Your workplace should be a place where you consider a safe environment. These brave women who put their lives at risk in war-torn countries, acting as peacemakers and representing the highly respected peacekeeping record of this country, they should not also have to fear their peers or their superiors from targeted sexual abuse. We have only heard in the last number of days of a breach of COVID restrictions, where up to 260 people attended a barbecue at a time when outdoor gatherings was limited to 15. And the case of another alleged sexual abuse case on a young female soldier by a senior officer at the same event. There seems to be a sense of entitlement and a lack of a fear and accountability in the Defence Forces. This must be dealt with. Senior officers and the Department and the Government must do better.
Deputy Martin Kenny.
Minister, the truth is that people across the country were horrified when they heard Katie Hannon's programme last September, because it laid bare something which people could never have imagined would happen within our Defence Forces, which I guess most people would have considered is a place where you have a command structure, where you have a controlled environment. But of course, when you have all of that, as we know from other institutions, it is a place where predators can feel that they have got a huge opportunity because of that. And that has been the case certainly for these women who have very bravely came forward, who have laid their souls bare to the country in regard to the situations they find themselves in. They have been the victims of sexual assault, of rape, of abuse, and of coercion and coercive control within that structure. And the difficulty, and I think one of the biggest tragedies of it, is that when they went to their senior officers, when they complained, when they tried to get this dealt with, that it was hushed up, covered up, and they were shut up and put back in the corner. And that, I think, is worthy of an inquiry in itself, without ever talking about the abuse that they went through. We are a country which, I think, has had a long history of dealing with these kind of situations in various institutions. And I think it would be very remiss if this government, if you went down the road of reinforcing the old ways rather than opening new ones. This is an opportunity to show that times have changed and that things are different. It is a relatively new situation that has been uncovered in recent years, that this has been going on within the Defence Forces. Nobody can say it's been going on for years and nobody knew about it. Perhaps they did, but certainly it's something that didn't come into this arena until very recently. So the government has the opportunity now to be the ones to handle this right, to make sure that they show that they will do it properly. And we all believe the Minister, in fairness, when he met the Women of Honour, when he said that he was going to be a priority for him, when he was going to do what he was needed to be done to show that things would be different, and yet he came out and went back to this notion of having a review of the situation, which is totally inappropriate and wrong, and in fact reinforces the wrong that happened in the first place, and re-traumatised these women, to think that they had the courage to come forward, for to do the programme with Katie Hannon, for to come out into the public and to tell their stories, and now for the Minister and the Government just to turn their back on them is an absolute disgrace. And it will be disgraceful if the Government continues going down this path. So, Minister, I think there needs to be a reflection as to where you're going with this, and to recognise that this is an opportunity for government to do something historic in this country, for government to do something right by women, because that has never been the case in the past.
Inish Antara. Ish go Sinn Féin le teachta Donegal léire.
Mágad cá hiarlag. Minister, in September, the Women of Honour bravely came forward to tell their experiences of bullying, harassment, of discrimination and misogyny, of sexual assault and rape. They were forced to go public with their very difficult and distressing stories because they had been so badly let down by the state and the defence forces in getting accountability for what they had experienced, because they were determined to get the truth. In that week, Minister Coveney in this chamber gave assurances he would treat the issue as a priority. He gave assurances that the women impacted would have an input into the terms of the review. He said he would bring about real change. This never happened. Instead, the Minister, backed up by An Taoiseach, decided, with no input from the Women of Honour, that this would be an internal review and not a statutory inquiry that the women affected had asked for. Fartig sé nach me go le gachtainna dolisteachán agus Páirteach Lacha ina measc issued a bhí na hargontaí ina gcuine na líomhaintí. Tá na maná tríis cheistú agus iad a gceart conas gurbé seo an fíor atrú a bhí an Tara Coveney ag mulla ceann bhí ó hin. An internal review won't establish the extent of abuse by perpetrators. It won't get to the heart of the coercive influence and other negative career impacts that followed from what was a wholly inadequate complaints process. Tá na multaí seo ag ligint mná síos, tá sé sin déanta níos measa de bhar cataráid ag an Taoiseach go bhéh béidir go déitfí inú go breise a bheith ann ag uairréigean sa tóchaí gan a bheith sa léir chana méid sin. Níl sé ró dhéanach den Tara Coveney ná an Taoiseach an rud ceart a dhéanamh inis. Minister Coveney can and must establish a full commission of investigation. The Women of Honour have shown great bravery, determination and resilience in their pursuit of truth and justice. And I think Women of Honour is a good title for them. They have shown courage, they have a great deal of pride in their own service and their role in the Defence Forces, and they feel very badly let down. But they still feel an obligation to their colleagues in the Defence Forces to make things better and to change things. It's now Minister Coveney's turn to take a stand against abuse and harassment, to stand up for that honour and to protect all current and future members of the Defence Forces and Naval Service. It's not too late for him to do the right thing.
In December, following the airing of the RTE documentary Women of Honour, the Minister for Defence told his House that in light of the dreadful revelations that emerged, he was going to put a process in place that will deliver real change. Unfortunately, we have seen coming from the Department has fallen far short of this commitment, or of the great lengths to which these women went in their pursuit of truth and justice. Minister, when survivors of abuse, in whatever form or circumstances it may be, go to great lengths and at great personal cost to tell their stories and seek justice, it is incumbent on us all to ensure that every mechanism of the state is made available to address these issues and to ensure that they do not happen again. But just like we've seen with the survivors of the mother and baby homes, this government seems to listen to anybody else apart from those immediately affected. And just like those survivors, the Women of Honour and others who have had similar experiences continue to live with the consequences of the injustices imposed upon them. What we learn through these revelations is deeply disturbing, as it concerns some of the gravest allegations that can be made. An internal review will not deliver real change, because we need to know the extent to which these problems prevail within the Defence Forces. There is a legal and moral obligation to ensure that those who serve the state and offer protection to others at home and preserve peace abroad are themselves protected. The Ombudsman for Defence is not an effective mechanism for dealing with complaints of the nature raised either, given the seriousness of the allegations concerned. But even if he said there are shortcomings in terms of the ability of his office to deal with the issues arising from the Defence Forces, one of the most serious of these is the fact that Section 4 of the 2004 Act does not adequately provide for certain categories of interpersonal complaints, which include inappropriate behaviour, sexual abuse and sexual harassment, among others. This particular shortcoming means that really we don't have accurate data concerning allegations of this nature, nor does the ODF have the ability to conduct own initiative inquiries. We have left it up to the internal investigation systems too long. So what the Women of Honour are in need of is a statutory inquiry that has the power and scope to determine the scale and depth of the problems across the Defence Forces. We have to examine the culture within the Defence Forces, not ignore it in favour of something lighter, which will leave the Women of Honour feeling more abandoned than they already do, because that is how they have told us how they feel. Minister, the Defence Forces is a workplace. As such, you have to commit to a zero-tolerance approach towards bullying harassment, discrimination, assault and all forms of gender-based violence in the workplace by establishing a full statutory inquiry into these allegations and their repercussions following engagement. Minister, the Women of Honour most recently walked out of a meeting with you because you would not address their concerns. If you continue to ignore their demands, what you will effectively be doing is ignoring every other victim of potential Gormagot.
I would like to thank my colleague Sarah Clark for bringing forward this motion in support of the Women of Honour. We fully support their call for full statutory inquiry. We commend their courage and bravery. We believe them and we will continue to stand with them. I have no doubt of the massive toll that this has put on them. Like many whistleblowers, they went through an incredibly difficult process to bring this to light. But like many whistleblowers, they were driven by what is right. These women have helped to blow the whistle on extremely serious allegations of abuse, sexual abuse, harassment and discrimination. The fact that an organisation set up to protect could enact this kind of treatment on those within its own ranks is dumbfounding. And again, like so many whistleblowers before them, the official channels failed them. And the measures that have been proposed by Minister Coveney to investigate these allegations are so inadequate almost to be offensive. They are, in the words of these women, ineffective and powerless to get to the real heart of the issues. These women deserve a hell of a lot better than this. These issues are long-standing, we all know this. Dr. Tom Clonan's research into this kind of abuse laid out this in painstaking detail. And as part of that research, 60 female soldiers, sailors and aircrew were surveyed. 59 of these reported that they had suffered abuse or discrimination. 12 said they had been sexually assaulted or raped. At first, there were attempts to discredit this research before eventually these findings were accepted, and we were told it would never happen again. And yet, as Dr. Clonan said, the culture continues. Minister, it was only a couple of weeks ago when members of your government stood up in this House. They said that we had to change how women are treated in this state. And now it's within your powers, Minister, to change how all women are treated here. It is within your power to change how women in our military are treated. Give these women the statutory inquiry they are calling for.
I'll now call on Deputy O'Murricu to conclude the debate. 10 minutes.
Guramaigad Cahirlock. Minister, I'm not doubting that Minister Coveney hadn't determined to look into a system that would deal with these particular issues as regards to complaints and the long-term issues that haven't been dealt with, that have been highlighted by the Women of Honour. But I think the fact remains is we've a long history in this state of failing those that have actually suffered the abuse, of not learning from the past and not putting systems in place that actually work. And I think beyond that, the criteria that really matters here is the fact that the Women of Honour have stated that this isn't going to cut the mustard, that this isn't good enough. Now, I'm going to put on the record, like many have done before me, that I want to commend them for their bravery and for their courage in relation to highlighting these issues that have gone on over many years and haven't been addressed. And whether the Minister, whether the Government, whether the Department had intentions of dealing with this and putting a system in place that was fit for purpose, the fact is we haven't gone far enough. It's like some of the conversations we've even had here in relation to historic abuse by the state over the last number of years, and the fact that the state is still failing to do that piece of work whereby you take those people who have suffered this abuse across the line to a place and a system that works for them and can provide them with the answers that are required, that provides them, well, as I say, a system that is properly fit for purpose. And the fact that they have not added their voice to others who may believe this is able to do the business it's meant to, I think that speaks for itself. They are the people that you needed to sign off on this, and they haven't signed off on it, and I think that's where most of the Irish people will lie in relation to this issue. Look, I think we all accept the need for a proper system in relation to complaints, in relation to abuse, in relation to those that have engaged in whether it's sexual harassment, whether it's abuse, and that people face the repercussions that are necessary. So we need to ensure long term that we have that piece of work done. But I think first and foremost that we are starting from a bad place in the sense that this is not being accepted by the women of honour. Look, we've all had the wider conversation in relation to the violence, the abuse and the issues that women across society have to deal with. Like this was highlighted to us by the dreadful murder of Aisling Murphy. We've obviously had further narratives and we've had further issues in the public domain about particular issues of alleged attacks on women, and I suppose we're somewhat more keenly listening to it now, and I'm aware also of specific pieces of work that I was always aware of, but like I said, I'm more keenly aware in relation to the work locally that Women's Aid have done and that the Rape Crisis Centre North East have done, and just that level of underfunding that they have and the services that are not fit to deal with those particular issues. And if we are really, really serious in relation to this entire issue, we are obviously going to have to carry out a needs analysis. We're going to have the real conversations, and we're going to have to ensure that we resource, so therefore that we can deal with those issues we deal with. We all accept, whether we're talking about the Defence Forces or we're talking about wider society, that we have to do a specific piece of work that involves everybody questioning themselves in relation to how we operate, on what we call out and what we don't call out, or what we have failed to call out to date, so we create a culture where that doesn't allow for any inkling in relation to any level of, as I say, gender-based violence or harassment or abuse or any of those things that are utterly unacceptable to the vast, vast majority of people, and we just need to ensure that we leave no space in society. But as regards this particular issue and the women of honour, what they deserve and what they're getting are not the same thing. They have been failed by this state over and over again. They are not happy with what's been put on offer at this particular point in time, so the Minister needs to re-engage. He needs to get their endorsement. I think that's an absolute requirement, and I leave it at that.
Before we start, Minister, can you confirm if you're here as the Minister of State in the Department of Defence? Yeah? Okay. And when you said in your opening statements that at the meetings both I and my colleagues have had with stakeholders, was that as Minister of State and Defence? Sorry? Oh, okay. The reason why I ask her here, is this, is that in a reply to a parliamentary question to a colleague of mine, Deputy Aengus O'Snuddick, Minister Coveney, who is the Minister for Defence, states no function of the Minister of Defence have been delegated to the Minister of State, with full responsibility for defence policies, and Department of Defence and Defence Forces remain under Minister Coveney and will continue to represent Defence at Cabinet. So that's further evidence of just the lack of seriousness that the Government is putting in this issue. And that's deeply, deeply disappointing. Now, you also said in your opening statement that Minister Coveney has an immediate obligation to serving members to ensure the workplace is safe and that there is zero tolerance and unacceptable behaviour in the Defence Forces. If the Minister is so concerned with the speed of change in relation to that duty of care, does the Minister not see that the commencement of an effective and accountable statutory inquiry would lead to an immediate change of behaviour in the culture of unaccountability and would effectively be over, and that this current resistance that is there to this inquiry might actually embolden those who behave in unacceptable behaviour by a perception that somehow that the Minister has their backs? Now, on another issue, Minister, I really do take issue with this, is that the government amendment says that, unfortunately, the systems, policy and workplace culture in the Defence Forces have not and are not serving all personnel well. It is not unfortunate that somebody is raped. It is not unfortunate that somebody is harassed, and it absolutely is not unfortunate that you have women like Diane Byrne, who ended up taking the state to court for the way that she was treated when she was pregnant as a serving member of the Defence Forces. That's not unfortunate, that's an absolute disgrace. As too is what happened to Yvonne O'Rourke, who had to take the state to the Workplace Relations Commission and won in December 2020 after years of battling. And at that point, it was said by Mr Bollinger from the Workplace Relations Commission, it beggars belief that women should be serving in the Irish Defence Forces for decades without the force's systems and instructions ever have been appropriately updated to ensure they reflect anti-discrimination laws that applies to pregnancy and maternity. Where was the urgency there? Where was the duty of care there? You see, because I've asked the Minister, because there was distinct recommendations came out of that Workplace Relations Commission. One of them was to make the payment to Ms O'Rourke for the investigation, to delay an investigation and hearing of this matter, as the Defence Forces did not withdraw its jurisdictional objections earlier than the closing arguments at the hearing. That's not unfortunate, that's an absolute disgrace. But the second one was that it also ordered the Defence Forces to carry out measures to combat pregnancy-related and other discrimination, with all such work to be complete by December 2021. In March 2021, I asked the Minister. I was told it's currently being considered. In September 2021, I asked again, and I was told again, are currently being implemented this time by military authorities. So the argument of concern and the argument of wanting to see systems change immediately for current serving members simply doesn't hold up to scrutiny. Because you know, as well as we do on this side of the House, that the only truly effective mechanism to bring about the systemic change that's needed is through a statutory inquiry. And failure to deliver on that is not only failing to meet the asks of the women of honour, but it's failing to meet the needs and the expectations of those who serve today, be that in the Army, the Navy or the Air Corps. And it is also going to fail to serve those into the future. And that, Minister, is truly not an issue that you want as a legacy. Now, is it really? Because that is a disgrace.
Thank you very much, Deputy. That brings this debate